Tonight, cold water poured on the US president's Gaza peace plan. Also tonight, Josh Frydenberg moulds a possible return to the political sphere. A desperate search for a woman believed to be trapped under the rubble of a Sydney townhouse. And a vital airdrop to the bottom of the world. Hello and welcome to ABC News Sunday. I'm Tamara, Oudyn. Israel's Prime Minister has labelled a proposal to bring about a total ceasefire in Gaza a non-starter, less than 24 hours after US President Joe Biden unveiled the plan, which he says was drawn up by Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu appears to have rubbished the proposal. It's only added to the anger within Israel, with tens of thousands taking to the streets, calling for the hostages to be brought home.
Fire and fury spilling over on the streets of Tel Aviv. Organisers say 120,000 people turned out in the largest day of protests since the October 7 attacks. The demands from the masses here are simple. They want a deal to bring the hostages home, but they say their Prime Minister won't do it.
Yesterday, Biden gave us, the families, a little bit of hope that was missing for us a lot of days.
That hope was a three-stage proposal that could end the war, presented by US President Joe Biden. He says it was drawn up by Israel, with Western leaders quick to offer their backing.
One of the best things about the potential of this deal is that we'd not only be able to get the hostages out, but we'd be able to flood Gaza with aid.
But less than 24 hours after Biden unveiled the plan, a statement from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu labelled the proposal a non-starter without the complete destruction of Hamas, saying Israel's conditions for ending the war have not changed.
It's unclear to what extent Benjamin Netanyahu was aware of or even involved in the US plan, and whether Joe Biden is trying to strong-arm Israel into ending the war before the US elections. Hamas says it's willing to negotiate, but the biggest disagreement remains the complete withdrawal of Israeli troops. And Netanyahu's far-right coalition partners have threatened to quit and bring down the government should this deal go ahead, further narrowing the likelihood of a truce.
In Rafah, where more than 1 million Palestinians had previously fled, Israel's invasion continues to deepen. Fresh strikes killed dozens of civilians last week, with the toll and suffering here growing by the day. Alison Horn, ABC News, Jerusalem.
Senior Liberal Karen Andrews has thrown her support behind a possible return to federal politics for Josh Frydenberg, saying he's needed back in the party. The ABC understands the former Treasurer is considering throwing his hat back in the ring for his old seat of Kooyong following an electoral redistribution in Victoria. But that would be at the expense of the female candidate the party has already pre-selected.
Could this be the Liberals' new comeback king? 3 decades after John Howard uttered that famous line about returning to the leadership.
Oh, that's Lazarus with a triple bypass. I mean...
Josh Frydenberg is weighing up the options of his own Lazarus-like return from the political scrap heap.
I'm not necessarily of his persuasion politically, but I think he's a thoroughly decent man.
He's such a statesman, so intelligent.
Mr Frydenberg's renewed interest comes after the Electoral Commission proposed new boundaries in Victoria, with the seat of Higgins being abolished and Kooyong expanded to take in affluent suburbs such as Toorak. Mr Frydenberg has the backing of senior Liberal Karen Andrews, who told the ABC, "We need to have the strongest political offering possible in Victoria, and Josh Frydenberg and his experience is it." But it's not that simple. The Liberal Party has already pre-selected its candidate for Kooyong. 31-year-old former finance professional Amelia Hamer got the nod earlier this year. Replacing her with Mr Frydenberg would not only prove difficult, it would also reflect badly on a party struggling with women's representation.
They still have a problem with women and representation of women and the whole issue around women.
It will be a very, very bad look.
Former Victorian Premier Jeff Kennett is firmly behind Ms Hamer.
If he wants to stand, then stand in a seat that we can win, preferably from the Labor Party.
Amelia Hamer wasn't buying into the discussion, tweeting only that here in Kooyong, the community loves to support strong women. The change in Kooyong's voter base since the last election may not play so well for the former MP. While there have been more than 24,000 new enrolments, all but 800 of those are within the new boundaries, and around 60% are aged under 39.
So the electorate's becoming younger and more diverse, and it's going to be a lot more difficult in 2025.
Sasha Payne, ABC News, Melbourne.
The federal government says it is using drones to track where former immigration detainees are living. There's been confusion after the Immigration Minister first revealed their use as part of a monitoring program that also includes electronic bracelets.
After a week-long immigration migraine, the federal government is clarifying how it's using drones to track former immigration detainees released after the High Court last year ruled indefinite immigration detention was unlawful.
More in the sense of monitoring the accommodation that people are living in and, for example, ensuring that it's not too close to schools or other areas that they're not supposed to be living close like that.
You could use Google Maps to find out whether someone's house is too close to a school. Are drones seriously being used for this?
That's my understanding, David, is to monitor the location and the accommodation of these offenders.
Facing questions about how closely the former detainees are being watched, given a man allegedly involved in violently attacking a Perth couple wasn't wearing an ankle monitor, the under-pressure Immigration Minister this week insisted the group is closely monitored.
Things like using drones to keep track of these people.
But a day later, federal police, part of a joint operation set up to manage the former detainees, said...
In terms of compliance and monitoring, that's a rule for ABF, but I've got no knowledge of drones being used.
What on earth is going on here, and why won't Andrew Giles be upfront about whether or not he just made this up or he accidentally revealed a secret drone program?
The Home Affairs Department says it may use aerial imagery from a variety of sources for operational planning purposes, like to confirm the location of a visa holder's accommodation. As for whether criminals who are foreign nationals should be deported, even if they've spent the majority of their life in Australia, the government says a new direction will make it crystal clear to officials that community safety should be their top priority. Meanwhile, the government has cancelled around 20 visas that were reinstated upon appeal under the existing direction. Evelyn Manfield, ABC News, Canberra.
People who share deepfake pornography online will face years behind bars as part of legislation being introduced into federal parliament this week. The government says pornographic images generated by artificial intelligence overwhelmingly affect women. And this is part of broader efforts to address men's violence against women. Under the new legislation, sharing non-consensual, sexually explicit deepfake material will carry a penalty of 6 years in jail. And someone who creates the deepfake without consent will face a higher penalty of 7 years in prison. Well, it's now been more than 24 hours since an explosion destroyed a home in Sydney, and rescue workers are yet to find a woman they believe is still buried in the rubble. The blast happened around lunchtime yesterday, forcing nearby residents from their homes.
Working through the night, rescuers struggle with huge slabs of heavy concrete, searching the rubble for a daughter believed to be visiting her mom at the time of the blast. The operation at this point is still a rescue mission, not a recovery one.
The mother is in my garage waiting for, she's been there since it happened yesterday and all last night and everything. And, she's sitting there, she's so upset.
Search dogs and monitoring equipment have been brought in to help, with every tool available being used in the painstaking search. But it is largely by hand, brick by brick, plank by plank.
Those efforts will continue, and they will continue until we locate a person or until we can substantively say that there is no person within the area that is being searched.
Several people have told the ABC that they'd smelt gas in the area in the lead-up to the explosion.
My next-door neighbour, he called the gas company, and the gas company said, no, there was no leak or anything, but we could smell gas for the last 2 weeks.
We are extremely concerned that there are reports of residents in the local community there smelling gas for some time. The Housing Minister is investigating that promptly, urgently.
The company Gemina that supplies gas to homes in this street says that their teams are investigating this incident, but that the cause remains unknown. More than 24 hours on from the explosion, rescuers face a second night under floodlights, searching for any evidence of the missing woman. Nabil Al-Nashar, ABC News, Sydney.
The Defence Force has completed a complex airdrop to deliver much-needed supplies to Mawson Station in Antarctica. The mission was launched after expeditioners were left without critical cargo because of faulty cranes on Australia's icebreaker.
High above the Antarctic ice, this is the moment 14 tonnes of essential supplies are released out the back of a C-17 Globemaster.
This mission's a really special one for us. It allows us to test all of our capabilities.
From the open hatch, dozens of pallets slowly fall to the drop zone, where expeditioners are awaiting the special delivery.
I would have to say it's one of the most spectacular things that you can see in Antarctica, is to see some 30 parachutes with cage pallets full of equipment that you're not sure what's coming, a little bit like Christmas, I guess.
The airdrop was required after faulty cranes on the RSV Noina meant half its cargo couldn't be offloaded, leaving staff at Mawson Station without important supplies over winter.
We are sending mechanical and electrical supplies, we're sending food, we are sending personal cargo.
The C-17's journey began thousands of kilometres away in Hobart, where the cargo was loaded up and strapped down. From there, the plane travelled to Western Australia before making its way south on a 10,000 kilometre, 14-hour round trip that required a mid-air refuelling operation.
The vast distance is certainly a challenge. Obviously, conducting mid-air refuelling is a complex task, but our crews are very good at it.
The airdrop was part of Operation Southern Discovery, which provides the Australian Antarctic program with logistical support from the Defence Force.
We work in the most extreme environments. It's critically important that we have lots of layers of approaches.
Ensuring the safety and well-being of Australian expeditioners in the frozen continent. Jono Gibson, ABC News.
Australian healthcare workers who've been in Gaza treating the wounded have returned home with harrowing first-hand accounts. Gazan health authorities say more than 36,000 Palestinians, almost 14,000 of them children, have been killed since October the 7th. Israel says around 1,200 Israelis were killed in the Hamas attack that day. And a warning, details and images in this story are graphic and distressing. Chantel Al-Khoury has tonight's special report.
Do an operation on her, okay?
After 2 weeks stationed at one of the last hospitals left in Gaza, this Sydney surgeon is still coming to terms with what he witnessed.
I went thinking, oh, when I come back, I'm going to be perfectly fine. But it's actually taken a lot to get over. You can't get past these memories.
Dr. Adesumili says many patients at Al-Aqsa Hospital were dying in terrible pain.
We would be doing these horrific surgeries where you've amputated legs and explored people's abdomen and opened their chests, yet they don't have adequate analgesia to be able to cope with afterwards, and they'd be on simple Panadol. So it was heartbreaking seeing them in agony.
And he can still hear the sound of parents wailing after losing their children.
I don't think there was a day that went by that I didn't see children dying. A lot of these children, I've got countless children's names in my head that I cannot even forget.
But the trauma he saw was more than just physical. Dr. Scarlett Wong supported thousands of unaccompanied children in Gaza, now made orphans.
The first trauma is that they're under bombardment and they're being killed and they're seeing their family and loved one killed by bombs and by quadcopters. That is the first trauma. The second trauma is that nobody's doing anything about it, that they now know that the whole world knows and yet no one is stopping it.
For Dr. Moder El-Beiruti, the horrors have become hard to describe.
Given the nature of those blast injuries, most people will be dead on arrival. The others will be with devastating injuries that we in medicine call non-survivable injuries.
There's certain types of trauma therapies where you actually need, your limbs to be able to do that therapy. It involves like hugging yourself. And there are lots of children out there who can't even do that therapy, and that was really challenging to think about because they literally have no way to comfort themselves.
On Friday, the IDF said more than 250 humanitarian aid trucks were transferred into Gaza. But the UN warns the amount of aid entering has dropped by 70% since Israel began its operation in Rafah, and at least 500 trucks a day are needed.
It's unfathomable to think that there's children dying of starvation 2 kilometres away with all this food that's rotting just outside, and we're letting this happen. So you can see all these aid trucks for kilometres.
All 3 doctors say they saw hundreds of trucks carrying food and medicine at a standstill on the Egyptian side of the border.
At least let them die when they're with a full stomach rather than die when they're hungry.
Now home, the doctors are on another mission to share their experiences.
Gaza at the moment is hell on earth.
What the children of Gaza need is for humanity to prevail, and for that to happen, we need a ceasefire.
Despite all the pain, they have the desire to live, and you feel that there.
A mission they're hoping they won't face alone. Chantel Al-Khoury, ABC News, Sydney.
Almost 10 days since a landslide swallowed homes in Papua New Guinea's highlands, villagers are still digging through piles of rubble, searching for the bodies of their loved ones. The death toll from the catastrophe still isn't clear, and there are fears the search could trigger a fresh landslip. Our correspondent Marion Farr is in the area hardest hit.
Still in mourning, 9 days after disaster struck. But before the disaster, a warning.
We came out of our houses and were calling others to wake up. Most people were still asleep.
I'm coming with some. Survivors in Mulitaka have told the ABC they remember hearing 2 large cracks around 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. Only an hour later, the mountain collapsed.
For those of us who heard the sound, we were able to escape, but the ones who didn't hear were buried in their sleep.
Almost a week and a half on, only a handful of bodies have been recovered, but there are fears hundreds could still be buried. Wende Wamblip Jr. survived, but lost 5 relatives, including his young daughter.
4 bodies were recovered, but my child remains buried. I am exhausted and I'm resting today. Tomorrow I will continue to dig with a crowbar and spade.
Digging for bodies using sticks and shovels seems like an impossible task amid the masses of rock and rubble, but people are still determined to find their loved ones. Australia is shipping in aid and essential supplies. Officials are warning that sending in excavators could trigger another landslide. A team of Australian disaster response experts are using drones to map the site to determine how large that risk is.
Once the authorities here have that information, they'll be able to make some firm decisions about how they manage the site.
While villagers who have lost everything face a long and painful road ahead.
My concern is finding new land where I can resettle my family. When you have land, you can build a home.
Right now, that home and so much else lies buried. Marion Farr, ABC News, Mulitaka.
Mexico is poised to elect its first female president today in what's expected to be the country's largest election in history. The nation already has relatively high levels of female representation in politics, but it also has a huge problem of violence against women. North America correspondent Barbara Miller reports from Mexico City.
In the heart of Mexico's capital, the names of those fighting for justice. Among them, Araceli Osorio, her daughter Lesvi, one of Mexico's many femicide victims. Araceli was initially told Lesvi had died by suicide. CCTV footage would later help prove her boyfriend killed her.
There are several moments when he attacks her while they are at the university campus. He was there the whole time.
An estimated 10 women are murdered every day in Mexico. Activists say many of the deaths are femicides, the killing of a girl or woman because of her gender. Amid rising violence, Mexicans are going to the polls and will likely for the first time elect a female president. Claudia Sheinbaum from the party of current President López Obrador is the clear frontrunner, ahead of Xochitl Gálvez.
You might think with two leading female candidates that violence against women would have been a key campaign issue, but that hasn't been the case here. Crime, the economy and social welfare have been the main topics.
This shows a complete lack of understanding for our country's problems and puts women at risk.
Maria Elena Rios survived a 2019 acid attack allegedly organised by her ex-partner. The musician has championed a new law categorising acid attacks as attempted femicide.
It's a giant step what's about to happen in Mexico, and we can't be let down.
A plea echoing across Mexico for a future so many women won't live to see. Barbara Miller, ABC News, Mexico City.
And if this story has raised any issues for you or someone you know, please call 1-800-RESPECT. Australia's trade tensions with China are easing after Beijing's decision to lift a ban on beef exports. But a new trade war could be brewing with Washington over electric cars, which could leave Australia caught in the middle. The ABC's Alan Kohler explains.
Australia's relationship with China these days is a bit like standing under an elephant walking a tightrope. You just hope they get there and don't fall off. For more than a decade, our exports have relied on China's booming property sector, supplying the iron ore and coal for the steel girders inside the walls of millions of apartments. But now that business is in a state of collapse. The government has just announced a series of measures to try to stabilise the property sector, but even if they work, which is far from certain, it's a long way back. To keep its economy growing in the absence of a property boom, China has been frantically investing in manufacturing. And on the principle of never doing things by halves, has suddenly become the world's biggest exporter of cars. And it now accounts for more than half of the world's electric vehicle sales. But while China is desperate to replace its property bust with car exports, the rest of the world is having trouble dealing with it. And they're not that pleased with what it's doing to their own car industries. America is putting a 100% tariff on electric vehicles, and Europe is expected to do something similar. In fact, trade actions against China have doubled in a year by countries around the world. So Australia is in a bit of a quandary. We really want China to win this trade war, but we really don't want to take sides against Europe and Uncle Sam.
To sport now, and Fremantle has produced its best performance of the season, stunning premiership hopefuls Melbourne by 92 points in Alice Springs. On the Gold Coast, the Suns ended Essendon's unbeaten run to the move into the top 8, while the Dockers could do no wrong to head to the AFL bye in red-hot form.
Billed as a battle of the rocks, it was Max Gawn who took early bragging rights for Melbourne.
It sneaks in.
It looked too easy for the Demons as they kicked the opening 2 goals. But just as the Dockers looked out of sort, things clicked, Fremantle kicking the next 6.
And that's a great strike.
Jai Amos has been under the microscope for indifferent form in recent weeks. He looked a different player in Alice Springs, as Fremantle produced its best first half in 5 years.
Oh, it is shaped beautifully.
To make matters worse for a shell-shocked Melbourne, Lockie Hunter was subbed out with a calf injury at the main break. The procession continued, Fremantle booting 7 goals to 2 to lead by 81 points at the final change.
His first goal of the season is something special.
The Dockers didn't relent in the final term, kicking their biggest ever score under Justin Longmuir as they climbed back into the top 8. That result presented Gold Coast with a chance to join the Dockers in the 8, but they would need to get past a red-hot Essendon.
Right, back home, his old home ground.
Ben Long celebrated his 100th match with the Suns' opening goal.
And he strikes that brilliantly.
The home side kicking 4 in a row to hit the front.
King, he shook it off.
Ben King's pursuit of the Coleman medal continued, booting his 3rd goal early in the second half as the Suns opened up a 20-point lead. The Bombers didn't take their chances.
Can you believe that?
Essendon eventually converted as the margin was reduced to 5 points.
Doesn't matter how, it just matters how many.
But the Suns always had an answer as they remained unbeaten at home in 2024. Tom Wildey, ABC News.
In tennis, Australia's Alex de Minaur has set up a French Open showdown with Russia's Daniil Medvedev after he advanced to the 4th round at Roland Garros for the first time. The world number 11 fought back from a set down to beat Germany's Jan-Lennard Struff in 4 sets.
Vying to be the first Australian man to reach the final 16 since Leighton Hewitt, Alex de Minaur was on the back foot early against his big-hitting opponent.
What a start from Struff.
Jan-Lennard Struff took the opening set, but the fleet-footed Demon hit back.
Surely not.
Oh, it's incredible what he gets back.
Rain set in on another grey Paris morning, forcing play to stop. When the contest resumed almost 5 hours later, de Minaur went to another level. De Minaur prevailed in 4 sets. And there was one fan in particular he wanted to thank for sticking by him in the wet and cold.
Yeah, that kid, after every single point, was yelling, was getting me up, getting me going. Every time I changed ends, I was locking eyes with him, and it was an extremely special moment.
The 25-year-old will next face Russian star Daniil Medvedev. De Minaur is the last Australian left in the singles draw after a 3rd straight 5-set match proved one too many for Thanasi Kokkinakis. An exhausted Kokkinakis was 2 sets down to American Taylor Fritz when he challenged a line call.
If you don't find that mark, I'm going to lose that game.
His protest worked and he won the next 2 sets. But Fritz recovered to claim the decider and send the South Australian home. Tom Maddox, ABC News.
To the weather now, and for the first night of winter, temperatures dropped to near or slightly below the June average, mostly ranging between 2 and 6 degrees. It was -4 at Falls Creek and Mount Hotham last night. Today it was cloudy across the south and mostly clear north of the ranges, although some cloud developed in the north this afternoon. Isolated showers continued mostly about south central and southeastern parts, and there were scattered showers in East Gippsland. Maximum temperatures sat between 11 and 15. The state's top of 17 was recorded at Wangaratta and Rutherglen. Here in Melbourne, we reached our high of 13.9 degrees just after 1:30 this afternoon. Outside now, it's 12. Interstate today, Sydney and Perth had showers, and it was mostly sunny in the other capitals. The satellite image is showing a broad mass of cloud extending through Queensland along the east coast and toward a low near the coast of New South Wales. There's scattered low-level cloud moving over the southeast. A high-pressure ridge is hovering over Western Victoria. A low in the Tasman Sea will approach from the east tonight and linger in eastern Bass Strait tomorrow, pushing the ridge back to South Australia. There'll be rain in Tassie and Victoria's east tomorrow, as well as in South Australia, the interior and WA's north. For the capital cities, it'll be wet in Hobart and Perth, overcast in Adelaide and Canberra, and sunny in Darwin, Brisbane and Sydney. Back home, there'll be morning frost and fog in the north and west. It'll be cloudy with isolated showers on and south of the ranges and dry in the northern and western districts. Rain in the far east will ease to showers in the morning, and we're heading for a generally cool day. On the bay, 20 knots south to southwesterlies will tend westerly at night, waves to 1 metre, and there'll be strong winds along the central coast, gales from that point east. There's a frost warning for the Mallee, Wimmera, Northern Country and southwest, and a warning for sheep graziers in East Gippsland. Monday in Melbourne will be grey with a top of 14, and it'll get down to 7 tonight. Here's how the rest of the week is looking at this stage. More of the same on Tuesday, a shower or two through Wednesday and Thursday. Cloudy on Friday and Saturday with tops of 16 and 15, then some sunny breaks on Sunday. And that's it for this evening's bulletin. From the news team for the moment, good night.